Today we're going to talk about factoring trinomials. This is actually an Algebra 1 skill, but we're going to review it and I'll talk to you like you've never seen it before, so it shouldn't be too difficult. The first thing I want you to do is to remember when we talked about factor by grouping. We do this when we have 4 terms. And the first thing we do is look for a GCF all the way across. But I don't see anything that will go into 8, 20, 10, and 25. So I'm going to go ahead and split my problem down the middle. I'll take the GCF of the left side, which would be 4, and I can take out b squared. So I would take out a 4b squared, and I'm left with 2b minus 5. And on the right side, my number's a 5. But because this negative 10 leads with a negative, we'll take out a negative 5. So I get 2b minus 5. And I know I'm on the right track because this piece matches this piece. So I'm going to go ahead and put my outside pieces together and rewrite my inside or my repeated piece. And this becomes my answer. So if you'll move to number 2 with me, again we're going to look, see if there's a GCF, but I don't see anything that will go into all of that, so I'm going to go ahead and split it. So the GCF of 6 and 15 is a 3. I can take a v squared out of both sides. So I get 3v squared. I'm left with 2v minus 5 when I divide it out. On the right side, I would take out a 4. So it's a positive 4. And 8 divided by 4 is 2. The v remains. And negative 20 divided by 4 is negative 5. So when I write my answer, I get my outside pieces, and then the inside or the repeated piece, and that is my answer. So I want you to think back, use these as your examples, and I want you to go ahead and pause the video and try numbers 3 and 4. Okay, if you've tried numbers 3 and 4 now, let's look at 3. I don't see a GCF across the whole problem, so I'll go ahead and I'll take out the GCF of the left, which I see is a 5 and x squared. So I put that outside. 25 divided by 5 is 5. I had 3 x's, but I took 2, so I have an x remaining. Anything over itself, like this, is going to become a 1. And on the right side, since I begin with a negative, I'm going to take a negative. 10 and 2 have a 2 in common, so it's negative 2. Negative 10 divided by negative 2 is 5. There's an x. And again, anything over itself is a positive 1. So my answer is my outside pieces and my inside or my repeated piece. So this is my final answer. For number 4, again, no common GCF, so I would take out a 1. And I can certainly write that, but I don't have to. So I have at least 2 v's. So I get v squared. The numbers are going to remain, but I had 3 v's. I took 2. And the v squareds cancel, so I'm left with 3. And then on the right side, there's nothing in common, so it's just going to be a 1, and nothing changes when I divide by 1. So it's my outside pieces, my inside or my repeated piece stays the same. And that is my final answer. So far you should have completed 1 through 4 on your worksheet. We actually already did all that in class, but if you need to go back and rewatch the video for any of those, you can. So then the question becomes, what do we do if we have 3 terms? Because you can't split 3 terms down the middle. So we'll use the AC method. So this is A, this is B, this is C. If you have Ms. Limbacher or myself for Algebra 1, you would have learned this, but if not, you can learn it now. So we are looking for 2 numbers that multiply to give me this and add to give me this, and we're going to just put those right here. And so in this example, A times C, 2 times 3 is 6, and my B is a 5. So I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to give me 6, that add to give me 5. Well, the only ways I can get 6 are 1 times 6 or 2 times 3. And the pair that adds up to give me 5 is this pair. So that's a 2 and a 3. And so when I write my final answer, we're not going to factor this all the way, but we are going to write it out. So I would take the 2x squared and the 3. But this time, instead of 5x, I'm going to write it as 2x and 3x. And then if we were going to continue this, we would split that down the middle and do what we did at the start. But we're not going to worry about that just yet. So we're just going to practice finding these 2 pieces right here. So let's do another example. So if I have this one, this, I owe you a point for that, should be a 3. It should be on your paper. So that's my bad. But this is an A, this is a B, this is a C. And so when I make my x A times C, that would be negative 10. My B is a 3. So I'm looking for numbers that multiply to give me 10. So 1 and 10, or 2 and 5. But this is a negative 10, which means one of these has to be negative. And we're looking for a difference of 3. Well, I can't use 1 and 10 at all to get 3. But I can use 2 and 5. And if I want a positive 3, then that means my 2 is going to have to be negative, because negative 2 plus 5 gives me 3. So I will use a negative 2 and a positive 5. And so when I write this, I take the 2x squared and the negative 5. But instead of writing plus 3x, I'm going to write minus 2x plus 5x. And so what I did is I rewrote these 2 pieces. So now I have 4 terms. So our whole goal is to get everything to 4 terms, so that I can then factor it. So go with me to example 7. If at any point you need to rewatch an example, that's why you can, rewind, pause, whatever. So I'm not going to do that up there. I'm going to do this right here. So this one might at first be a little confusing. So we have to remember, anytime we have a variable, there's actually a coefficient of 1. So 1 times negative 15 is negative 15. The b is negative 2. So I'm looking for something that multiplies to give me 15. Well, my options are 1 times 15 or 3 times 5. But it's negative. So I'm trying to get a negative 2 out of this. Well, there's no way to get a negative 2 out of 1 and 15. But there is out of 3 and 5. And if I want it to be negative 2, then my 5 would have to be negative, because 3 plus negative 5 is negative 2. So my numbers are 3 and negative 5. So then when I go to write my answer, my x squared and my negative 15 stay the same. My negative 2x is going to turn into a 3x minus 5x. And then I would, in just a minute, we're going to continue those and go ahead and factor them. But right now we're just going to pause there. So what I did is I rewrote that middle term so that now I have 4 terms. So let's look at example 8. On this one, this is my A, this is my B, this is my C. So when I make my x, 4 times 4 is 16, and my b is 8. So I'm looking for numbers that multiply to give me 16, to add to give me 8. My options are 1 and 16, 2 and 8, or 4 and 4. And I'm looking for something that adds up to 8. So 1 and 16 is not going to work. 2 and 8 is not going to work. 4 and 4, and since 16 is positive and 8 is positive, then they're both going to be positive 4. So I'm going to leave the first and the last the same, the A and the C, but my B is going to be cut up so that now I have 4 terms, and I would eventually split those and factor each side. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how to make those. This X just takes practice and getting used to numbers. So hopefully we can, you'll work on that and get better at it as you go. So let's talk now about the entire process. So we're going to factor all the way from start to finish now, and kind of go from there. Okay. So on this particular problem, I'm going to look for something. It's not 4 terms, so I'm going to have to do my ABC. I'm going to make my X over here just to save room. So 4 times negative 20 is negative 80. And my B is negative 11. Now, negative 80 is a big number. So if you're having trouble with that, what you can do is go to your calculator. And if you go to y equals, you can put in negative 80 divided by x. And then hit second graph. And look at your table. And in your table, you'll see some numbers. And you're looking at the whole numbers because you don't want to consider decimals. So if I do that, negative 80 divided by x, and I go to my table, I see 1 and negative 80, 2 and negative 40, and I keep going down. So do that in your calculator. That'll help you. So I'm looking for something that adds up to negative 11. And I see a 4 and negative 20, but that would give me negative 16. But a 5 and negative 16 is one of the options. And so 5 times negative 16 gives me negative 80, but more importantly, 5 plus negative 16 gives me negative 11. So when I rewrite this, my first and last stays the same. But that negative 11R is going to be broken into a 5R and a negative 16R. So we've done that part, but our goal here is to factor. So we're going to go ahead and continue. So now we're going back to what we started with. We have 4 terms, so we're going to split it, and we're going to factor each side. So the GCF of 4 and 5 is 1, but they each have an R, so we can take an R. So it's 4R plus 5 when we divide out an R. 16 and negative 20 have a negative 4 in common. I took the negative because the leading number was negative. So negative 4. 16 divided by 4 is 4R. 20 divided by 4 is 5. And I write my outside pieces and my inside or repeated piece. And that, my friends, is my final answer. So we do this piece, the X piece, because we want to make it 4 terms. Because once we have 4 terms, we know how to deal with that, and that's when we end up with this answer. So if you need to rewatch that example, that is perfectly fine. Go ahead and do that. But we're going to keep going and kind of move on from there. So number 10. Let's look at it. So again, this is A, this is B, this is C. So I'm going to make myself an X. 4 times negative 12 is negative not 36. That would be wrong. be negative 48. And we're looking for something that adds up to give me negative 13. So again, calculator is a great tool. So if you go to y equals negative 48 divided by x, and you go to second graph, and you're looking at your whole numbers, I'm looking for a pair that adds up to negative 13. And I see a 3 and a negative 16. That seems to work. So I'm going to take my first and last, but instead of negative 13, I'm going to put 3x and negative 16x. And now I have 4 terms. Life is good. If I look at the left side, all they have in common is an x. So I take that out. If I look at the right side, they have a 4 in common, but the 16 is negative, so I take a negative. So it's negative 4, and I have 4x plus 3. So that is my answer. The outside, the inside pieces, and we are done. So hopefully as you go through these you get a little faster, and I believe we're going to do 4 more together, and then I'm going to cut you loose. But you have this at your fingertips, so go back and rewatch some of it if you need to. This one, before I freak out, I need to remember that everything actually has a 1. So don't lose your mind over that. 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. My b is negative 1. Now, there's only one way to get 2, so this one isn't really exciting, 1 times 2. But I need it to be negative, so one of these has to be negative. I need a negative 1, so the 2 has to be negative because 1 plus negative 2 is negative 1. So it's 1 and negative 2. So I keep the first piece. The last piece stays the same. I'm going to split this piece into a 1b and a negative 2b. And it is not necessary to write the ones, but it does kind of help keep us in line when we're factoring. So if I look at the left side, they only have a b in common. So I take out a b, I get b plus 1. The right side has a negative 2 in common. So I take it out and I get b. Anything over itself is plus 1. So the outside pieces and then the repeated piece. And this is your answer. So you can go back over that. You can look at it again. My guess is that this X part is kind of maybe the toughest part. But you can do it. And you've learned this before. This is not a new thing. So let's look at number 12. Again, don't freak out. There's a 1 there. A, B, C. So I'm looking for numbers that multiply to give me 1 times 5, which is 5, but the add to give me is 6. There's only one way to get 5. It's not a real interesting number. And surprisingly, they add up to 6. So a 1 and a 5. So my first and last stay the same. My 6x is going to split into the 1x and the 5x. Now we got 4 terms. This left side has an x in common, so if I take it out, I get x plus 1. The right side has a 5 in common, so if I take it out, I get x plus 1 also. And my outside piece is my inside piece, or my repeated piece. And we're done. And hopefully you're getting a little faster. You're starting to remember some of this. We're going to do 2 more together, and then I'm going to cut you loose. And you'll do awesome. Alright, on this one, this is my A, this is my B, this is my C. So A times C is negative 40. Sorry about that. And my B is 3. So you might need the calculator on this one. If you feel like you do, you're certainly welcome to use it. If you don't, you could list your pairs. 1 times 40, 2 times 20, 4 times 10, and then 5 times 8. So I'm looking for, this is negative, so one of these numbers has to be negative. I'm looking for a pair that adds up to 3. Well, I'm not going to get that from 1 and 40. I'm not going to get that from 2 and 20. And I'm not going to get that from 4 and 10. So this is my pair. Now I just have to decide which one's negative. If I need a positive 3, then the smaller number has to be negative, so the 5. So it's negative 5, positive 8. So I keep the first and last, and I take the middle, and I split it. And now I have something I can factor. So on the left side, I'm going to take out an A. So it's 2A. Nope. I'm just giving you all kinds of points on this one. Sorry about that. So it's A, 2A minus 5. And on this side, it's a 4. So it's, again, 2A minus 5. So it's the outside pieces, and then the inside or the repeated piece. And that's my answer right there. All right, on this one, this is my A, this is my B, and this is my C. So this one, 5 times 16 is going to be a very large number. So not really, but kind of, 80. And then the bottom is negative 24. So most of you are going to want to use your calculator on this one. So you'll do 80 divided by x, and then second graph. So if I do this, if you're in the positives, there's no way to add 2 positives and get a negative. So we have to kind of figure out what's going on. If you scroll up on your screen, you'll see that the negatives actually mirror the positives. So we're looking for 2 numbers that multiply to give me 80, that add to give me 24, but they're negative. So if you scroll up just a little bit, you'll see this pair, negative 4 and negative 20. Negative 4 times negative 20 gives me positive 80, but negative 4 plus negative 20 gives me negative 24. So that's what I'm after. So we do 5m squared plus 16, and we're going to break this middle part apart, and we'll get 4 terms. We'll split it. The left side only has an m in common, so it's 5m minus 4. The right side has a 4 in common, but because that 20 is negative, you got to take that negative or your numbers will never match. 5m minus 4. So I take my outside pieces and my repeated or inside piece, and that is my answer. So you're welcome to scroll back through this as much as you need, listen to it again, whatever you want, but I want you to do 15 through 32. When you finish, turn in your class tray, and please give your best effort and your best behavior, and I'll see you soon.